This week on Jerusalem Dateline, violence and terror attacks hit the city of Jerusalem. Plus, the West Bank is not an official state, so why is the U.S. State Department putting it on U.S. passports? And shakeup in the U.S. Senate. How will the GOP takeover affect the Obama administration's Middle East policies? Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell, coming to you with the Temple Mount and the old city of Jerusalem behind us. For several weeks, riots and terror attacks have rocked the city, but it may surprise you who's behind the violence and what they're planning. It happened again on Wednesday. A Palestinian terrorist used a vehicle as a weapon to plow into Israelis, killing one and wounding 13 others. The attack took place at this intersection not too far from Jerusalem's old city. It's the second attack of this kind in just the past 2 weeks, and many are wondering if this is the new weapon of choice for Palestinian terrorists. Later, another terrorist rammed into 3 soldiers at a bus stop outside Jerusalem. Earlier in the day, Palestinians rioted on the Temple Mount. Police spokesman Mickey Rosenfeld said they're separate issues.
There are tensions in Jerusalem, but our aim is to do everything possible to both deal with these types of incidents and, of course, stay one step ahead and prevent those incidents from taking place.
But Hamas itself made the connection. Shortly after the first attack, the terror group said it was intended to defend Al-Aqsa, the mosque on the Temple Mount. There are a growing number of Jews that want to pray on the Mount, where only Muslims are allowed to pray. The Israeli government says it won't allow that to happen, but Israel says Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is inciting violence by telling Palestinians that the Al-Aqsa Mosque is in danger.
We've seen that on a ground level. We felt that. The Israeli police have had to deal with Palestinian suspects throwing stones at police officers.
The Israeli Foreign Ministry posted this video, it says, shows Palestinian youth preparing and fighting Israeli police on the Temple Mount. Palestinian affairs expert Pinkas Inbari says the trouble is part of a bigger plot.
No, it is not spontaneous. It is coming from, basically it is from Muslim Brotherhood, and behind the Muslim Brotherhood is the Qatar.
Hamas is the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, which has the Nusra group in Syria and Beit al-Maqdis in the Egyptian Sinai.
All of them together, and they want to make Jerusalem the main subject, top of the agenda, in order to regain the Arab masses again.
Inbari says Abbas stopped short of directly paying Palestinians to commit terror, but Hamas is filling in the gap. However, he says the call to violence is not resonating with most Palestinians.
It is far, far below the expectation of Muslim Brotherhood. Jerusalem, by far, generally speaking, is not dragged into the conflict.
This week, the midterm elections put the Republicans in charge of the U.S. Senate. We talked with CBN News senior editor John Waggy and Julie Stahl about the impact these elections will have on U.S.-Israeli relations. John, Julie, thanks for joining us. Julie, there's been a lot of violence here. There's been riots. There's been terror attacks. Some people think we're on the verge of a third intifada. What do you think?
That's right, Chris. Some people think we're on the verge of it. Some say we're already in it. Others say, no, we're not going to have a third intifada at all. There are some differences between this and the previous 2 intifadas, armed uprisings of the Palestinians. One thing is that this one is really centered in Jerusalem. We really haven't seen attacks anywhere else in the country. One of the similarities is that the reports that we're hearing is that the people are being paid. Just like in the second intifada, there were some 40,000 terrorists, people paid to be terrorists. That, you know, if people said, hey, what does your dad do? They said, hey, my dad's a terrorist. And they really got paid to do terrorism. The similarity is that most of the Palestinians are not really in favor of this. It's really just a paid job.
Yeah. John, turning to the big news in the United States about the midterm elections, how do you think the midterm elections and the results now that the Republicans are controlling the U.S. Senate is going to affect U.S.-Israel relations?
Well,
I think that it's good news, basically, for the government of Israel and the people of Israel that these elections worked out the way they did. I think what you're going to see, first of all, every committee chairmanship in the U.S. Senate is going to change hands now from Democrats to Republicans. What that means is several pro-Israel senators are going to come into a position where they can call hearings, they can start to open up and investigate U.S. policy in the Middle East, which most Americans believe right now is a failure, and that can't do anything but help Israel, in my view. I think that, you know, for instance, John McCain is about to become chairman of the Armed Services Committee. We'll have a new chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee who won't have to do the bidding so much of the State Department and the White House. Now, Obama is still commander-in-chief, and in that sense, he can wield a great deal of foreign policy power, but he's going to have to answer to Congress, and I would be very surprised and disappointed if Congress doesn't start opening up some hearings right away about U.S. funding of terrorism, about support for Israel's enemies at the expense of, or support for U.S. enemies at the expense of allies like Israel. And I think that there's going to be a little bit of a spotlight shined on what the administration's been doing over the past several years.
You know, later this month there's going to be a big decision about the Iran's nuclear program, negotiations going on between the P5+1. Do you think this is going to affect those negotiations?
I'm concerned that they're going to try and ramrod these negotiations through before a new Senate and Congress is allowed to take power next January. I think that it's high on the Obama administration's list to reach an agreement with Iran, and more importantly, to prevent Israel from doing anything to stop it. That sounds just unbelievable, but that would be the central foreign policy of the administration, but that seems to be exactly what it is. So unless something dramatic changes, I would see the Obama administration going forward pushing even harder to try and reach some sort of agreement with Iran before the new Congress can get its legs.
And John, there has been some speculation that the Obama administration might actually pull this diplomatic cover for Israel in the United Nations. Any likelihood of that happening?
Oh boy, that would spark a real Donnybrook in the United States, I think. We've just seen a huge statement by the American people repudiating the Obama agenda, and it would really be a reach for them to do that. I can't say they wouldn't, though, Chris. I don't know if they would actually try and do something like that. I think that the days of them being able to pull these kind of things and getting some cover from leaders in Congress is maybe about to come to an end. I pray that that's the case.
Yeah. And Julie, you did a story recently about Israeli Americans voting in the U.S. elections. What are they looking for in these elections?
Well, you know, Chris, judging from the answers I got last week, there's a lot of happy people that the Republicans have now taken back control of Congress, of the Senate and the House of Representatives. I think, you know, most people are concerned about America for their relatives' sake, but over here they're looking at the foreign policy. And until now, the Obama administration foreign policy hasn't been so good in the Middle East, not just for Israel, but for the surrounding countries. I think most people are glad that the Republicans are back in charge in Congress, and they're hoping that will carry some weight as far as the Obama administration goes.
Okay. Well, John, Julie, thanks for joining us. It's going to be fascinating to see how this unfolds, and very important for both Israel and the United States. Thanks for joining us. The U.S. Supreme Court heard a case this week about a Jewish boy born here in Jerusalem. But the U.S. State Department refuses to list Israel as the country where he was born. They argue that the status of the city of Jerusalem is still to be decided. And as you can see from this report, it's a situation similar to Jewish people born in the so-called West Bank, or the biblical land of Judea and Samaria. The Lassard family lives in Givat Ze'ev, a thriving community of 12,000 residents just 2 miles from Jerusalem. Washington calls it part of the occupied territories in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But some say that the State Department is going too far when it records the birthplace for Americans like the Lassard's children.
We have home births. So he was born here, really in the West Bank, as the Americans like to call it. We call it Judea and Samaria. This is Jewish land here. It's been Jewish land since the time of Abraham.
In Jerusalem, an estimated 1,000 Americans are born each year, and their documents say only Jerusalem. No country is recorded for their birth. It's the only place in the world where that's the case. Yisrael Medad says it's the principle that matters.
It is very, shall we say, injurious to Israel's position in the political diplomatic world, and doesn't make any sense.
According to Medad, no one has ever declared the West Bank a state, and even the Palestinians don't call it that, but the State Department insists on using it as an official location.
They're engaged in political diplomatic creationism. They're creating a state that doesn't exist. They take away Israel from Jerusalem, but they add West Bank to Ramallah, Nablus, or Bethlehem, or Shiloh, or Alon Shvut.
In response, the State Department told CBN News that the final political status of Jerusalem has been in dispute since 1948 as a result of the long-standing Arab-Israeli conflict. The U.S. government has pursued a policy of encouraging the parties to that conflict to settle all outstanding issues, including the final status of Jerusalem, through peaceful negotiations between the parties, with the support of the broader international community. Therefore, the U.S. government does not acknowledge the sovereignty of any state over Jerusalem. Regarding the West Bank, the State Department said the applicant can decide whether a settlement name or West Bank is listed as the place of birth. The Lassards say they probably won't pursue changes to their children's documents, but Medad says he wants to see the White House take action.
The White House should take the lead and tell the State Department, cut out all this bureaucracy. This is the situation. If it changes in some sort of future peace agreement, that's one thing. At the present moment, we all know Jerusalem is the capital. Judea and Samaria are being administered by Israel.
Up next, he's a marked man, hated by millions, speaking his mind about Islam. Stay tuned for an astonishing interview with Dutch politician Geert Wilders. He knows he could be murdered at any moment, but this brave Dutchman says he'd rather die than not speak the truth. He's been under police protection for the past 10 years, all because he's standing up to radical Islam. Dale Hurd brings us his courageous story in this CBN News exclusive.
He is one of the most controversial figures in the world, hated by millions, marked for death. He is Dutch Parliament member Geert Wilders. Wilders believes the religion of Islam is violent and dangerous, and because he has said so publicly and persistently, he has given up a normal life. It was 10 years ago this month that Wilders began living under police protection. It began after the murder of Theo van Gogh, who made a film attacking Islam. Dutch police believed Wilders might be the next victim and showed up at his door.
And they were wearing machine guns and bulletproof vests. And I said, hey, what is happening? And he said, well, we don't know what is happening, but you have to leave now in 3 minutes. So I could just take some shirts and went away, and we didn't know where we went, where we would go. The police didn't even know. We changed cars and we ended up in an army barrack. And since then, 10 years ago, I have not been home. It's not only the threats, but it's the fact that you lose your freedom and your privacy. My wife and I lived for a few months in a prison cell in Zeist, where the Lockerbie suspects used to be imprisoned. And nowadays, we have safe houses. I live in a safe house from the state.
Do you ever wonder if you made a mistake? Has this been worth it?
Well, I'm sure I did make no mistake. I make mistakes every day. I'm just human, so I'm full of mistakes. But to speak the truth about Islam, as I see it, and as the reality is not a mistake. I wish many people did it. I understand why few people do it, because the price is very high. Besides the death threats that you get from average people, from Islamic descent, from organizations like Al-Qaeda or the Taliban, you also, a lot of people label you as a bigot or a racist or an extremist. They try to hurt you in any possible way. You are sued, like I have been and will be again, by a criminal court or by another court. They will sue you, they will threaten you, they will label you So I understand it's not very attractive to speak out against the dark forces of Islam, to be proud of our own values and identity that I believe are based on Christianity and Judaism and humanism, not about Islam. And you pay a very high price. So I understand that people don't do it, but people should do it. And what is happening with the Islamic State nowadays in the last few months has opened the eyes of so many people. So I hope it will change.
You can't think of doing anything else. You never wished you had done something else to have a normal life.
I wish I had a normal life, yes. I would be lying to you if I would say that that is my most important wish, to lead a normal life. But even more important than that is to fight Islam, to fight for our freedom, the freedom of our society, to be proud on who we are. And I really strongly believe that Islam is dangerous, Islam is violent, Islam wants to dominate, not assimilate in our societies. And our countries, our free societies will change. And Christians, Jews, apostates, we will be the first one to pay a price if Islam will get its way in our free societies. So we have to stand up and fight against it. And I would rather die than not be able to speak freely.
Speaking of dying, some don't believe you'll die a natural death, that sooner or later terrorists will get to you, and they're planning to kill you at some point in the future.
Yes. Yes. You know, it's better not to think about that every day, about the threats and what could happen to me or my family. It would be impossible to live by. So I don't, but you are right. It can happen. It can happen.
Are you willing to spend the rest of your life in police protection?
If it has to be like that, then I will have no choice. It's better to have police protection than to be dead.
Up next, the ancient discovery that's shedding light on a turbulent period of Jewish history. Archaeologists here in Jerusalem uncovered a large stone with the rare Latin inscription dating back to the Roman period, about 100 years after Jesus. It was a time when the Romans tried to erase any trace of the Jews from the city. And as John Wagi explains, the stone may help explain why the Jews rebelled against the Romans nearly 2,000 years ago.
The 2,000-year-old one-ton stone was dedicated to the Roman Emperor Hadrian.
We have preserved enough letters and words that we can figure out the name and the titles of the emperor and by whom the inscription was dedicated, and probably the entire monument was constructed.
The 10th Legion dedicated this arch to Hadrian upon his 14th Tribunicia Potestas. That would be 130 of the Common Era.
The Israel Antiquities Authority discovered the stone during a salvage excavation between a mosque and a church near a busy Jerusalem street. Found in a Byzantine-era site, the ancient stone had been recycled to build a water cistern.
I think it's very significant because it's hard evidence of an official construction project that was carried by the Roman army for the coming of the emperor to the city.
Excavation director Dr. Rina Avner says there's more that the stone does not reveal.
We don't have the new name of Jerusalem that was given by Hadrian, and we don't have the indication of the change of the city's status as a Roman colony.
Hadrian ruled the Roman Empire from 117 to 138 AD. He renamed Jerusalem Aelia Capitolina after his family name and built a temple to Jupiter on the ruins of the second Jewish temple.
It was a policy to Hellenize the land and erase the Jewish past.
The unanswered question is whether Hadrian provoked the Jewish Bar Kokhba revolt from 132 to 136 AD by building pagan temples, or if he built the temples to punish the Jews. The other half of the stone was found nearby more than 100 years ago and is on display in a museum in the Old City. Avner says it's always exciting to find a direct physical connection to the past. John Wagi, CBN News.
Coming up, praying for the peace of Jerusalem in the heart of the city. Welcome back to Jerusalem Dateline. One development here in the city is the number of prayer ministries praying for the peace of Jerusalem. And one of them just celebrated its one-year anniversary. The Israel Prayer Tower in the heart of Jerusalem celebrated its one-year anniversary.
The vision for the Israel Prayer Tower is to bring the Lord's kingdom back to earth.
Dr. Paul Denakaran is the director of Jesus Calls Ministry that founded the Prayer Tower. After 1 year, he says the center is ready for a new season.
But now I'm looking for people to come from all over the world to come and pray here in this prayer tower in Israel. And I'm looking for a place where we could host them. They could stay here and pray from this place.
The vision of the prayer tower is for 24-hour a day, 7 days a week, prayer and worship. Basically what's going on is we see Israel and the nations coming together through this prayer tower.
The tower serves the nations and the local body.
We have had people from Korea, from China, from Sri Lanka, India, the USA, and they are all thrilled. And also the local congregations need a place to worship and pray. And we have opened this place for all congregations because we are not a church, this is a place of prayer.
Kobe Ferguson directs the Israel Prayer Tower.
We also minister to people that come, and we have people coming from all over the world and also calling us. We have a call center that's just basically praying for you. We really are strong in the concept in the scriptures that says the word of the Lord will flow forth from Jerusalem and the law from Zion. So we believe God has a special heart and attention, obviously, on Israel and Jerusalem. And so from here, we're praying for the nations. And we're seeing God supernaturally answer that.
Ferguson says the Israel Prayer Tower is part of a growing movement of prayer for the peace of Jerusalem.
I really believe since 1948, the eyes of the church worldwide are opening towards God's prophetic timetable, his plans for Israel. And I believe a big part of that is kind of all of a sudden the eyes being open to Psalm 122, that we should pray for the peace of Jerusalem, that all who love thee will prosper. And the Lord is showing the nations of the world, look, we can't really go much further without praying for Israel.
Well, I hope you join us in prayer for the peace of Jerusalem. Given recent events, it certainly needs prayer. That's it for this edition. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.